Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity, members of the committee. I am Dan Quisenberry, President of the Michigan Association of Public School Academies. And as all this has been rolling out over the last few weeks, there have been media reports that somehow portray us as this powerful church school lobby, like we're outsiders and not necessarily relevant to this discussion. We believe we're important in this discussion because we represent 150,000 families. Their schools, the students that are in them, the communities that need them, and the people who support school choice around the state. Sorry, I was just trying to get it going. That's good. Perfect. Thank you very much. As you recall, I'm here representing those voices. And they've already, throughout this whole process, made their voices heard, and we've been trying to weigh in and help you as you go through this difficult decision about what do we do with the Detroit public school system and how we make sure kids are being well served. And thinking about not only the 45,000 kids enrolled in DPS, but the 50,000 are enrolled in Detroit charters, and the 20-some thousand that are enrolled in school choices other than those two. So as you'll recall, on December 3rd, this is a picture from our advocacy day. We had 500 charter school parents that came to Lansing to make their voices heard. What they said is they don't want additional bureaucracy or obstacles to the choices that they feel like they should be making. And as we've had these discussions, a piece of an idea called the Detroit Education Commission has been promoted, which is not in the current legislation, but parents very clearly told us that's not something they want, stepping between them and their schools. In October, we released information, a scientific survey of Detroit parents and residents. 75% of them said they want more school choices, not less. Over 80% strongly oppose any plan that would limit or remove the independence of schools and tamper with their rights as parents. Mr. Chairman and Senator Hansen, the legislation you have before you is absolutely going in the right direction. But I do want to comment on some of the things that have been suggested to you that aren't in the legislation yet, and actually address what we think are some solutions. Something you've heard in the last two hearings is certainly discussion around standards. We would agree. There's actually been agreement by a variety of different types of groups. While these bills don't address it, Michigan should be moving quickly to establish a new statewide accountability system, setting the standard for all schools, utilizing an A through F letter grading system based on a new assessment strategy with standards that will make sure every child in the state is college and career ready. Some would tell you that the state's not going to do this, so Detroit should do it on its own. That'll be a huge mistake. The reason is it is a state function. But additionally, why should a Detroit parent who chooses to send one child to, say, a Detroit school and the second child to perhaps a school just outside of the city of Detroit face two different sets of standards? Additionally, you have schools that would face a patchwork of confusion. It would not only add to the existing confusion that there already is with color codes, force rankings, and other things that no one seems to understand or be able to explain. An accountability system, besides setting a target for actual student achievement, would also help in coordinating and closing poor-performing schools. A new A through F system like we've proposed in the past would appropriately flag schools that are underperforming. We'd even suggest using F schools or schools that are in the lowest 5%, limiting their ability to shop for a new authorizer. If they're being held accountable, they should be held accountable and not have opportunities to move around. Then you can also use the State Reform Office that has already testified to intervene and close the worst of the worst. The slide I have before you here is actually a list of the 27 schools in the city of Detroit that have been in the lowest 5% for 3 or more years. Of those 27 schools, 3 are EAA schools, 1 is a charter, the rest are DPS schools. We would certainly recommend to you set standards. Let's move appropriately to intervene and address the lowest performing schools. Kids should not be in these schools either. A standard would also help us with openings. As you heard a couple weeks ago from the mayor of the city of Detroit, he talked a lot about all this kind of move to open new schools. Well, we need a standard to be able to do that. There are other mechanisms besides the Detroit Education Commission that the mayor can utilize to do that as well and provide for some city planning. He is already in charge of facilities. He has the uses of city government. And there is new information being developed that's useful to school operators on demographics, geographic information about the city, school utilization, school performance, and other trends that can inform and help people who are opening new schools make the best kinds of decisions about where to go in the city. I also want to dig deep on this concept. What's a Detroit Education Commission? You've heard it referred to it a lot of times. It's never really specifically described. While some say it won't run schools, they may be technically correct about the classroom, but a DEC would indeed run schools. Let me give an example. If one politically appointed commissioner hires one human being, and that person has control over judging quality, picking who opens, who closes, approving growth, approving new class sizes, approving grades of schools, controlling facilities, developing the city plan, controlling enrollment, controlling student records, possibly controlling transportation, possibly controlling special education, perhaps even professional development and recruiting. That sounds like a central school district to us. It doesn't work in Detroit. It hasn't worked in Detroit. It hasn't worked in our urban centers around the country. And parents have been leaving that strategy behind over the past 40 years. We should too. From another point of view, maybe a political point of view, the DEC is similar to some other ideas. There's a lot of opposition to things called emergency managers and the EAA. Why? They say because it's a single political appointee with absolute power. Why then, we would ask, are the same people opposing the EAA and EM now proposing a new political appointee with unlimited power? It doesn't make any sense to us. Last point I have time to make is that we want to focus on the most important thing. How do we improve academic achievement? After all, isn't that what this is all about? And we think to do that, we have to look at what's currently working and build on it and not create obstacles for it. So here too, it's very easy, you even heard the testimony here. It's very easy to say, well, there's some good charter schools, there's some bad charter schools. Without evidence, that's far too easy to say, and it's not accurate. In fact, I'm going to go back and pick on the mayor a little bit. If he was here, I'd have a good time picking on him a little bit. But when he presented to you, he said, well, there's 24 good charter schools and 24 bad ones. His list, though, was filled with errors. So we pointed some of that out to the mayor. He did make corrections. Hopefully he sent that to you. We understand that he did. But what he didn't tell you is there's actually a lot of other low-performing schools besides those 24. It's actually 83. And now there's a list of 45 DPS schools that are actually below that. The point is, let me get to the data. This is what's actually happening in the city of Detroit. These are all the charter schools and all the DPS schools. Blue is DPS, red are the charter schools. Those are the recent M-STEP language arts scores, and you can see the same thing at MAP. A different way to look at this statistically is that only 20% of the charters, 21% of the charters in the city of Detroit are below the DPS average. 70% of the DPS buildings are below the DPS average. My only point here, Mr. Chairman, is if we want to look at what's working academically, we can see some of that. And what I see in the theme around this data is autonomous schools work. I'm a guest given that principal at Spain Elementary. If you empowered her to do what she needs to do for that building, would have a much more successful time meeting the needs of the students in the building. That's what we see in the charters. Same kids, same environment, same challenges, different results. That's what we want to encourage. In fact, I'll take a little personal outrage to say sometimes I'm frustrated when people say these kinds of differences don't matter. Well, Dan, they're about the same as. Don't misunderstand me. If you look at the actual percentages here, we're not happy with the charter school performance either. But you can't say to me that that difference doesn't matter for the children that are attending those schools. In fact, Stanford University tells us that that difference amounts to about 3 months of additional education every year. We times that by 12, that's an additional 3 years of education for every student that attends one of those schools. That's significant. It does make a difference. Mr. Chair, I want to end with just telling you a story from some of those parents because there's much, much more than just that. There's a father by the name of Del Nasser, and his family, they live in southwest Detroit. He'll tell you that in 2009 and 2010, when traditional schools were being closed, he and his wife considered moving out of the city to make sure their children had a quality education. A neighbor suggested he check out a local charter school, happened to be Universal Academy. He thought about it and decided they would try the charter school instead of moving. Just last spring, his oldest son graduated from Universal with a 4.0. He's now attending U of M Dearborn with a full-ride scholarship. He's happy. His kids who are still attending the charter school are happy. They still live in their neighborhood in Detroit. He says the school is like a family. A community is where parents can really be involved and engaged. When they're there, their concerns are expressed. They get together with parents and teachers in the school, and they solve that. Community members is local control at its finest. The second school, actually, the mayor had in his data, is the Detroit Achievement Academy. It's a wonderful school. When the mayor was testifying, one of the mistakes that was in that data was that this school was on the list of abysmal. I can tell you it is nowhere near abysmal. Neither are several other schools that were on that list, but let me tell you a little bit about the Detroit Achievement Academy. It's an elementary school. Even though it's only been there for a little more than 2 years, they've already seen tremendous growth and progress. When the first graders were tested after the last school year, they discovered that they experienced an average of 1.5 years growth in reading. 1.5 years of growth. That's remarkable. And it's certainly important in our urban communities where there's poverty. In addition, the Detroit Achievement Academy has a focus on agriculture, on healthy eating. They give their students 3 meals a day. They teach them healthy eating habits, and hopefully those kinds of habits that'll last a lifetime. They do this in a building that's clean and well kept, where teachers show up to work, and where most of the charter schools in Detroit are like that. They run entirely locally. So we're trying to make the point that autonomous schools run by people in those communities makes a huge difference and can actually drive student achievement. 70% of the charter schools in the city of Detroit are actually locally operated. We think that's an important point. So in summary, I appreciate the chance to weigh in, that you're headed in the right direction with the current legislation regarding the old code, new code. We would recommend establishing a statewide A through F accountability system, set the expectations and hold people accountable to them. We think it's important to fund all children, certainly solve the financial crisis at DPS, but don't forget about the other students as well. Use incentives to coordinate openings, to improve student outcomes. We need more autonomous schools like charters, not less. And last, resist the temptation to establish the Detroit Education Commission. New centralized controls that might feel good temporarily, we don't think it'll be a solution. So thank you. We'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Quisenberry. A question from Senator Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two questions. One, do you or your organization offer transportation to students?
Yes, many of the schools do. Charter schools are like all public schools. They're not required to provide transportation. It's in their per pupil funding. So it depends on the school. They make individual decisions that make sense for the population that they're serving.
Do you have a number on how many schools there are?
I don't know, Senator. We could check and verify that for you, but many do. Some don't. It depends on the population. And usually it's a strategy whether you pick up points or drop off points to try to maybe reach out to a neighborhood that's too far away, or to transmit students between an elementary building and a middle school building.
So would it be safe to say that there are some students at this point in time can't make it to those facilities because of transportation issues?
I would certainly agree, Senator, that transportation in the city of Detroit is a huge obstacle. And the schools, I would imagine DPS as well, is doing everything they can within a pretty difficult environment to do that. Let me just answer it a different way, Senator. If you go to Chicago or New York or any other place in the country, there's a significant amount of choice. You have a city system that's providing some opportunity for people to move, students to move if they're older, and we have some obstacles there in the city of Detroit that go beyond the school system.
Okay, so we're just taking DPS provides transportation, and Some of you do, and some of your organization does, and some don't. Okay, so second question, do you have to take a child into your schools? Can you deny a child enrollment into your school?
We have the same requirements that all public schools do. We take all students that apply, regardless of their background or competency or special education or anything. The only limit to that is you have a capacity issue. So if your school is fully enrolled, and most of the schools in Detroit are not, you can't stop, and then kids are put into a lottery, and they're blind kind of
So
race.
basically, you can pick and choose.
No, sir, you cannot. And most of the schools in the city of Detroit at this point don't have waiting lists, so they are open.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hood. Anybody else? Senator Randall.
Just Mr. Chairman, to Dan, I just want to apologize. I got stepped out for a second. I didn't mean to miss the beginning of the presentation. Thank you.
It was dynamic.
I'm sure it was. It always is.
Further questions? Thank you, Mr. Quisenberry, for being here. Thanks for your testimony. Next, we're going to have Brad Williams and Greg Handel from Detroit Regional.